Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in the public space in cryptocurrency for about 4 years now, and I've noticed time and time again, pretty often, that people neglect Ethereum. They don't look at Ethereum as much as they should. They're constantly focused on Bitcoin, rightfully so, because Bitcoin is the leader of the market. But they're also constantly focused on altcoins, which most of the time is unjustifiable. Altcoins generally are doing nothing special at all, except for very brief periods of time in the bull market when we see altcoin seasons. For the most part, altcoins just get destroyed, pretty much. What they fail to look at a lot of the time is Ethereum, and that's been especially prevalent in the last 3 months. In the last 3 months since April, Bitcoin is upwards about 60%. The broader altcoin market is also upwards about 60%, so they've matched the returns. Altcoins have matched Bitcoin's returns there, but it's Ethereum actually that has stolen the spotlight. Ethereum is upwards about 180%, tripling the returns of both Bitcoin and of the altcoin market. Now, this could be a good sign for altcoins in the coming weeks and months, because obviously when money trickles down into Ethereum, that is the start of what I like to call the money flow cycle in cryptocurrency. Money starts out in stable coins. People buy Bitcoin during the bear market. Bitcoin goes up high. Bitcoin pumps. Bitcoin gets boring. People throw their money into Ethereum, and then they throw their money into altcoins from there when Ethereum does the same thing as Bitcoin did. And then finally everything tops out. That's the money flow cycle in crypto. We've gone over it many times in this YouTube channel before, and you're probably just intuitively aware of it, even if you haven't actually seen it in a graph format. So the optimistic side for altcoins here is that the fact that Ethereum is pumping means altcoins might pump soon, because eventually people will get sick of Ethereum, get bored by the prospects of Ethereum returns, and throw their money into altcoins fundamentally due to greed and hype. But that is how the market has behaved in prior cycles, and there's nothing really saying it has to behave like that again, especially considering if we're going off prior cycles, we actually should have seen the altcoin season start way back here in November 2024. So we need to look into some uncertainties and doubts that we have about a potential altcoin season, which could actually be a big dud. Very hard to tell at this point, but we'll at least do some commentary on it in this video today, and I'll kind of lay out the playing field for you. I'll also discuss potential Ethereum price targets for this cycle because I think it's interesting to bring them up. Before we get into it, guys, check out the Bitunix Exchange. A lot of people ask me what exchange I use as a trader. I use the Bitunix Exchange, and I don't have a contract with them. I haven't signed anything with them. I don't work for them. I advertise them on my own accord. With my referral link down below, you can get a 15% trading fee discount permanently attached to your account, as well as up to 8,000 USDT in rewards just by signing up with my link down below. Why would you sign up? Well, it's global, it's non-KYC, it's never been hacked before, it's got all of the functions and pairs that you would expect for a major exchange. For that reason, I use it. And I implore you to consider using it as well. Sign up with my link to help out the channel, help out yourself. Cheers. So first and foremost, we know that Bitcoin is facing quite harsh resistance at 124,000. That resistance is coming after a breakout from this level right here, going backwards to 2017. You can see we broke that level. We've spiked upwards to 124,000. We're now flipping that level for support until that level breaks to the downside. Nothing bearish has happened. So we're actually in a pretty bullish stronghold right here with pretty high potential for forming something like a bull flag formation on shorter term timeframes. I'm not concerned about Bitcoin's macro health at this point. I think Bitcoin looks pretty good. But the resistance comes from things like this, the 2-week chart RSI triangle we're facing for resistance right now. We've also got resistance coming from this angle-based channel on Bitcoin's logarithmic chart, where the angle of ascension between top and bottom is halving each cycle. If we extrapolate that trend forward, there is resistance here at 124,000. And furthermore, more evidence of resistance in that region comes from the power law chart on Bitcoin, specifically the green line on the power law chart, which we're rejecting from once again right now. We've rejected from it many times previously. So we actually are facing very hefty, very strong resistance. It's just not immediately acknowledgeable because we don't have any basic historical observations of price action in this region. We've never been this high before, I should say, in layman's terms, and therefore we don't really know what's here based on looking at the Bitcoin chart alone. We have to look at these more complex, more nuanced charts. More hidden charts, quite frankly, from momentum indicators to power law chart indicators to logarithmic regression channels, which highlight resistance that wouldn't be immediately acknowledgeable. And so basically, I do think that even in what we are seeing right now, which is an Ethereum season, Ethereum dominating the market, even in those Ethereum seasons, you do still have to rely on Bitcoin for macro changes. Macro changes have to occur for the stage of the money flow cycle to change. For us to go from an Ethereum season into an altcoin season, there has to be a macro change stemming from the god, which is Bitcoin. And so basically the assumption I've been working under is that when Bitcoin breaks above 124,000, we will probably shift from Ethereum dramatically outperforming everything to altcoins dramatically outperforming everything. Ethereum won't go down or anything, and neither will Bitcoin, but it will just be going upwards less aggressively than the broader altcoin market. That's the assumption I've been working under. And that could become a reality at 124,000. Look, in honesty, there's nothing actually saying specifically 124,000 breaking will cause that. What $124,000 is it represents a macro region. And when we break that macro region, we enter a new macro environment, which would be synonymous, in my view, with a change in the way the money flow cycle is working in cryptocurrency. So basically, if you love altcoins and you can't wait for altcoins to pump, the next opportunity for you to see altcoins potentially start pumping massively would be upon Bitcoin breaking 124,000. And the nuance there is not just pumping massively on the price chart, because that's already been happening, but pumping heavier and more aggressively than Bitcoin and Ethereum, because right now altcoins aren't actually doing anything spectacular. They're literally just matching Bitcoin's performance on a generalized scale, which actually isn't enough to make them a favorable investment, because obviously if you're getting the same returns on an altcoin than you are with Bitcoin, you're in a bad position, because the only reason to invest in altcoins would be to take on a higher reward for a significantly higher risk. Bitcoin is safer than altcoins, and so to compensate, you want a massively higher reward. You're not getting that right now. So as I've said previously, we have about 3 months left in the cycle, and let's just assume the 4-year cycle will play out here. I know that that's an assumption, but it's really the only assumption we can make from a data perspective, because there's no data suggesting anything other than the 4-year cycle will play out at this point. And there's obviously speculative rumors from news events and things like that, but there's no data. The data is what we historically have, and what we historically have is basically telling us the 4-year cycle has encompassed the entirety of Bitcoin's price action. So with that said, 4-year cycle says we top out around October, more or less. And that basically leaves us with 3 months remaining here. Now, 3 months actually is plenty of time to see some sort of altcoin season. In prior cycles, yes, it's correct to say that altcoin seasons have lasted, almost a year on both occasions. In fact, they lasted exactly 320 days on both occasions. Which is why I said before that it probably should have started in November 2024, because if it started in November 2024, that would be 320 days away from the expected October top. And the fact that that didn't happen has actually changed quite a few things, which I'll mention in a second here. But the good news is we don't really need a long altcoin season, because even in our altcoin seasons previously, the vast majority of the gains that have occurred on altcoins have happened within very short periods of time. Look at the Bitcoin dominance chart here. Yes, these altcoin seasons have been prolonged, but the sharp drops in Bitcoin dominance, which line up with the altcoin pumps, are all very short-lived. They all last like a couple of weeks to a few weeks at a time. So we have a very significant amount of time still to see a very significant altcoin season, even though we have way less time than prior cycles. We don't need much time to see it. Altcoins do also generally run about a month longer than Bitcoin. That's another thing to consider, which we'll discuss later when it's more relevant. So everyone kind of is waiting for that altcoin season to happen. But right now we are still stuck on the Ethereum leg of the cycle. Ethereum is still outperforming altcoins dramatically. And I suppose this raises some doubts and uncertainties. It makes things hard to predict, because look, yes, it is true to say that the money flow cycle in cryptocurrency has typically gone from Bitcoin to Ethereum, right, to altcoins, to stable coins, right? This is how it generally works. So let's just say USDT down here as well. So money generally starts out in USDT. In the bear market, it flows into Bitcoin when people see Bitcoin gets low enough for them to justify buying. From there, Bitcoin pumps upwards like it's done, went to 100,000, then money started flowing into Ethereum when people got sick of Bitcoin and wanted more lucrative returns, but still remained rational enough to manage risk in some capacity. From here, the next logical step for it is to go into altcoins, and then everything will pump. There will be nowhere else for the money to go. People will sell their altcoins. That will lead to a domino sell-off effect, and people will sell their money back into USDT. That's how it's typically worked. But unfortunately, this cycle hasn't been typical, right? It hasn't been typical in what we've just said before. Typically speaking, in the last 2 cycles we've had, okay, we have seen 320-day long altcoin seasons. That's typical, okay? So for us to assume that a typical money cycle flow will occur when this cycle has actually been anything but typical for altcoins is not necessarily logical, right? We probably can expect something to change. It's just impossible to know what will change. And that's why for now, I'm kind of sticking to the assumption that it could be typical until directly proven otherwise. Another weird thing we've seen so far this cycle is the massive Ethereum sell-off that lasted from December last year on the monthly chart all the way down to April. Like, yeah, Ethereum is tripling the altcoin market's performance right now. It's also tripling Bitcoin's performance. But it's worth noting that Ethereum also corrected much more massively than altcoins earlier this year. It went down with 67% in 4 months, right? The broader altcoin market, yeah, it's not doing as well right now, but it only went downwards about 43%. So Ethereum went downwards 50% more than the altcoin market did, which could actually be what's making up for what's causing Ethereum to pump more massively. You know, Ethereum went down more, and therefore people saw it as a much more lucrative opportunity than altcoins because it was way, way, way lower and cheaper. And so they bought Ethereum much more massively than the altcoin market, and that's why Ethereum's pumping. So it could be completely different to what we think is happening here. You know, we're sitting here saying, oh, it's just part of the regular money flow cycle. Ethereum usually pumps first. But what actually could be the case here is that Ethereum just dramatically overcorrected, and people saw Ethereum as an opportunity to buy rather than altcoins, hence why Ethereum's tripling altcoins performance. And that would be completely outside of the money flow cycle, because the money flow cycle would suggest that Ethereum wouldn't have corrected that hard in the first place. It's actually altcoins that would have corrected harder than Ethereum. So I think the fact of the matter is here, you know, I can sit here and say, oh, we're in an Ethereum season, and that's going to lead to an altcoin season, and everything's going to be great. I can say that all I want, but it doesn't actually make it true. I don't really know what's going to happen here. That's just a speculation, assuming that what has historically happened will continue to happen for the money flow cycle. But we do kind of know at the same time that what has historically happened isn't really happening, because what has historically happened would have entailed an altcoin season starting in November 2024, which didn't happen. So we're kind of in the dark here a little bit. So there actually is this massive kind of cloud of uncertainty that is encompassing the entire Ethereum pump that we've seen and the broader altcoin market pump. And it's not really being addressed by many people. And I just realized the other day, I haven't really addressed it either. And that's why I wanted to make this video, just to address it. What we do know for sure, let's just focus on what we know. We know that Bitcoin is behaving relatively normally this cycle. And we know that even though we've seen these big drawn out corrections, and those corrections have been bad for the altcoin market because they've been the antithesis of hype, which altcoins require to survive pretty much. The fact of the matter is we are still within the 4-year cycle date range trends estimations of where Bitcoin should be around this part of the cycle and how it's behaving. Bitcoin is looking good. Bitcoin's looking normal. It's really Ethereum and the altcoin market that aren't. They're showing signs that they're kind of fracturing for what they've done historically. Now, with this said, I do still think you are in the most logical state of mind to assume that right now this just is the Ethereum season before the altcoin season. But that's simply because we don't have any other theories to work with, because we've never seen anything else occur. Not necessarily because that's actually factually what's happening. The good thing about cryptocurrency and the markets in general is you can react as things change. And right now, it's pretty clear what's happening. Ethereum is outperforming the altcoin market, and Bitcoin, it doesn't really matter why that's happening, but it is happening. That's the truth. And if altcoins start outperforming Ethereum and Bitcoin, cool. That's an altcoin season. It doesn't really matter why it's happening. It's just happening. And we can just follow what is actually happening rather than constantly thinking about why things are happening, which is what we're doing in this video. So the fact is, Ethereum is outperforming the rest of the market right now. And that makes Ethereum pretty much the center of attention, in my view. Assuming Bitcoin remains in its bullish stronghold, assuming Bitcoin is not in an active breakdown, it's really Ethereum that is gathering my attention. So where could Ethereum go in this cycle? Well, we did have some trends on Ethereum historically, but unfortunately, a lot of them are broken now. We had a trend, not a trend, but a pattern basically that highlighted, well, Bitcoin saw a gain of 250% from its 2017 all-time high to its 2021 all-time high. Ethereum saw the exact same 250% gain from all-time high to all-time high. And so we could have made an assumption that, okay, well, however high Bitcoin goes this cycle, we'll just take a measurement of the Bitcoin all-time high to that price point and apply that exact same percentage to Ethereum. And that would be the same thing that happened last cycle. The problem with that is that, unfortunately, Ethereum is not doing as well as it did last cycle. Ethereum, in the last cycle, broke its prior all-time high about 10 months before its eventual top. Right now, we're, according to the 4-year cycle, about 3 or 4 months from the top. and we are yet to break the Ethereum all-time high. So that analysis kind of falls apart. But if we're just working with that kind of, I guess, very choppy, very speculative analysis, and if we just get a very conservative price target for Bitcoin, let's just say very, very conservatively that Bitcoin only reaches 135,000 this cycle, okay? It'll probably go higher than that, but let's just say conservative. That would be a 98% gain from its 2021 all-time high. We apply that 98% gain from the Ethereum 2021 all-time high. That would take Ethereum to about $9,000 this cycle. And if we adjust even further for the fact that Ethereum is underperforming dramatically, let's just say it's a 50% gain, okay? Ethereum would go to about 7,500, right? The point I'm trying to make here is that there is a realistic shot for Ethereum to go significantly higher than it is at right now. And just because we've seen dramatic gains in the last 3 months, it doesn't mean the gains are over. In fact, the way it works with Ethereum and altcoins typically is that gains ramp up as we head towards the end of the cycle and even after the Bitcoin chop for about a month. Now, you guys seem to agree with me here. I asked the question, where will Ethereum top out this cycle? And the largest minority of you said between 6,000 and 8,000. So people are quite bullish on Ethereum right now, and I think that's quite justifiable. So a bit of a video filled with kind of rumors and speculation and doubts and uncertainties, but I really just want to bring it back to the core kind of way you can react. The facts are this. The facts are Ethereum's doing exceptionally well, right? The facts are it's probably going to be the case that altcoins will do well in the coming weeks and months as well. But we don't know that for sure. And so the only way we can appropriately react to this situation is watch out for any changes to the Bitcoin macro. If Bitcoin breaks down, get the hell out, run for the hills. But until then, watch out as well for any signs that altcoins could start to outperform Ethereum, right? That could be the start of the altcoin season we're looking for, but we won't actually know until it happens. So guys, thank you for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed. Lots of discussion, not much looking at charts, but I think discussion on topics like this is actually more important than looking at charts. These are the things you should be thinking about as we head into potentially one of the most parabolic times of the last 4 years. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Please check out the Bitunix Exchange. A lot of people ask me what exchange I use as a trader. I use the Bitunix Exchange, and I don't have a contract with them. I haven't signed anything with them. I don't work for them. I advertise them on my own accord. With my referral link down below, you can get a 15% trading fee discount permanently attached to your account, as well as up to 8,000 USDT in rewards just by signing up with my link down below. Why would you sign up? Well, it's global, it's non-KYC, it's never been hacked before, it's got all of the functions and pairs that you would expect for a major exchange. For that reason, I use it. And I implore you to consider using it as well. Sign up with my link to help out the channel, help out yourself. Cheers.